Lady Rosamond Vale arrived at Briarwood Court with a magistrate, a physician, and an empty seat in her carriage reserved for her daughter. She intended to leave with all 4 seats occupied. The physician would confirm that Marianne had been frightened or mistreated. The magistrate would order the gates opened if the Duke resisted, and Rosamond would sit beside her daughter throughout the journey home, holding her hand and promising that no powerful man would ever control her again. It was a flawless rescue. Except the gates of Briarwood Court were already open. No guards challenged the carriage, no servants demanded names. Even the great iron doors leading into the courtyard stood wide beneath the grey morning sky. Rosamond leaned forward. "Something is wrong." Magistrate Solby peered through the window. Open gates usually suggest the opposite. Not at a duke's estate. The physician, Dr. Ellison, adjusted the leather case on his knees. "Perhaps they are expecting guests." "They are expecting no one." Rosamond took a folded note from her sleeve. It had arrived the previous evening without a seal or signature. "Your daughter will belong to the Duke by noon. If you mean to save her, come before the Eastern bell falls silent. Do not warn him." The handwriting had been disguised, but the final letter of each line curved inward, exactly as Marianne formed it. Rosamond had recognized her daughter's hand. That was why she had travelled through the night. For 6 months, Marianne's letters from Briarwood had become increasingly strange. She never complained directly, she never begged to return, but phrases appeared that no contented young woman would use. "The library doors remain locked after sunset. His Grace insists I stay close to him. I am not permitted to explain what happens in the western rooms." The final letter had contained only one sentence. "Mother, the Duke is no longer the man the county believes him to be." Rosamond had needed no further warning. The Duke of Asterley had taken her daughter into his household as a temporary archivist. He had promised respectable work, cataloguing his family documents. Then, 3 months became 6. Marianne stopped visiting home. Rumours spread that the Duke intended to marry her. And now came the anonymous message. Rosamond watched the carriage cross the courtyard. "What sort of man leaves every entrance unguarded on the morning he intends to force a woman into marriage?" Magistrate Solby answered carefully. "One who believes no one can stop him." The carriage halted before the main steps. Rosamond stepped down before the footman could assist her. Briarwood Court rose above her in pale stone and black ivy. The eastern tower stood apart from the main house, its large bell visible through an arched opening. It was not moving. Yet no one had rung it. A row of servants waited on the steps. They wore no formal livery. Every man and woman had tied a narrow white ribbon around the left wrist. Rosamond approached the steward. "I am Lady Rosamond Vale. I have come for my daughter." The steward bowed. "Miss Vale said you would arrive before 11. Rosamond stopped. She knew. She hoped. "Where is she?" "In the East Gallery." "Take me to her." "I cannot." Magistrate Solby stepped forward. "Are you refusing Lady Rosamond access to her daughter?" The steward looked at him without alarm. "No, sir. I am informing her that the East Gallery has been sealed by order of the court." Rosamond glanced at the magistrate. "What court?" The steward's gaze shifted toward the eastern tower. "The one presently deciding whether the Duke is fit to remain Duke." A cold silence settled over the steps. Rosamond had prepared herself for cruelty, scandal, even a secret wedding. She had not prepared for this. "What has happened to His Grace?" Dr. Ellison asked. The steward looked toward the open doors. "That depends upon whom you believe." Inside the entrance hall, every portrait of the Duke had been covered with white cloth. The clocks had been removed from the walls. The long dining table had been pushed against the staircase, blocking the route to the western wing. Servants moved quietly through the house, carrying sealed boxes and stacks of estate books. This was not a wedding morning. It looked like the final hour of a dynasty. Rosamond followed the steward through the hall. "Why are the portraits covered?" "By order of Lord Percival Dane." "The Duke's cousin?" "His closest male relative." Rosamond knew the name. Percival Dane had visited Vale House twice during Marianne's childhood. He had been charming, courteous, and deeply interested in every inheritance to which he was not entitled. What authority does Lord Percival possess here? He petitioned the Crown Commission 3 weeks ago, the steward replied. He claims the Duke is incapable of managing his person, title, or estates. On what grounds? The steward stopped beside 2 oak doors marked with white ribbon. That his grace has lost his memory. Rosamond stared at him. A duke does not lose his title because he forgets a few names. He allegedly forgot his own. The doors opened from within. Marianne Vale stepped into the corridor. Rosamond's breath caught. Her daughter wore a dark blue dress with no jewels. Her hair had been pinned plainly beneath a lace cap, and ink stained the fingers of her right hand. She did not look imprisoned. She looked exhausted. Mother. Rosamond crossed the space between them and seized her hands. Are you hurt? No. Has he threatened you? No. Are you being forced to marry him? Marianne's expression changed. Who told you that? Rosamond took out the anonymous note. This arrived yesterday. Marianne read it quickly. I did not write this. The handwriting is yours. It imitates mine. You wrote that the Duke insisted you remain near him. He did. You wrote that the western rooms were locked. They are. You said he was no longer the man the county believed him to be. Marianne looked toward the sealed doors. That was also true. Rosamond lowered her voice. Then come home. I cannot. Marianne. Not yet. Whatever hold he has over you, he has no hold over me. Rosamond looked at the white ribbon around her daughter's wrist. Then why are you wearing his household mark? It is not his. Marianne lifted her wrist. The servants chose it. Why? To show the commission that they stand with the Duke. Rosamond released her hands. You stand with him too. Yes. After what he has done. Marianne looked directly at her mother. You do not know what he has done. Then tell me. Before Marianne could answer, a man's voice sounded behind the oak doors. Miss Vale. It was weak, but unmistakably authoritative. Marianne turned immediately. Rosamond blocked her path. You will not go back in there. Mother, move! You sent warnings. I sent letters asking you to trust me. You said you were not permitted to explain, because every letter leaving Briarwood was being opened. Rosamond's anger faltered. By the Duke? No. One of the doors opened wider. A tall man stood inside the East Gallery. The Duke of Asterley was only 38, yet he looked years older than when Rosamond had last seen him. His formal coat hung loosely from his shoulders. Dark shadows marked his eyes, and one hand gripped the back of a chair for balance. But he was not confused. His gaze moved immediately to Rosamond, the magistrate, and the physician. Lady Rosamond, he said, you brought precisely the witnesses Lord Percival required. Rosamond stiffened. I brought them to remove my daughter from your house. The Duke gave a faint, humourless smile. I am afraid someone arranged for you to remove far more than that. Marianne went to his side. Not like a frightened dependent, like the only person in the room he trusted. Rosamond watched her daughter place a document before him. The Duke read it, signed the lower corner, and returned it without hesitation. His hand shook. His understanding did not. Dr. Ellison entered the gallery. Your Grace, I was told you had suffered a loss of memory. The Duke looked at him. You attended my mother during the winter of 1809. You prescribed willow bark for her fever and argued with the household surgeon regarding the dosage. Dr. Ellison's face changed. That is correct. You later married the surgeon's sister. I did. You have 2 sons. The elder is at Cambridge. The younger wishes to become an architect, though you disapprove. The physician slowly closed his medical case. Your memory appears remarkably detailed. For the moment, Rosamond looked at Marianne. What does that mean? The Duke answered. It means that at certain hours I remember everything. At others, I awaken in rooms I do not recognize. Rosamond studied him. You are ill. So Lord Percival insists. You deny it? I deny the cause. A bell rang once within the eastern tower. Everyone in the gallery became still. Marianne glanced toward the windows. We have less than 40 minutes. Until what? Rosamond demanded. Until the commission reconvenes, the Duke replied. If I fail its final examination, Lord Percival becomes guardian of Briarwood, controller of every estate account, and temporary holder of the ducal authority. And Marianne? The Duke looked at her daughter. She becomes the woman accused of creating my condition. Rosamond's face hardened. This is why you kept her here. No, Marianne said. This is why I stayed. You could have come home and allowed Percival to erase every record proving what was happening. What record? Marianne walked to a long table covered in open books. Each ledger contained lists of meals, meetings, medicines, visitors, and the precise hours at which the Duke's confusion began. I noticed the pattern during my first week, she said. His Grace remembered everything in the mornings. By late afternoon, he could barely recognize his own rooms. The next day, he recovered. Dr. Ellison examined the books. You recorded every incident? Every one. Rosamond looked between them. You are an archivist, not a physician. No, but I know the difference between a man whose mind is failing and a man whose memory disappears according to a schedule. The Duke moved toward the table. Marianne discovered that my confused periods began after documents were brought from the Western Archive. Rosamond frowned. Paper cannot steal a man's memory. Not the paper, Marianne said. The drink served with it. Dr. Ellison's attention sharpened. What drink? An almond cordial, prepared only when Lord Percival's secretary visited. The physician looked at the Duke. You continued drinking it after noticing the connection. I did not notice. Marianne did. Rosamond's eyes settled on her daughter. You saved his life. Marianne shook her head. Something more important to Percival than his life. The Duke completed the answer. My legal mind. Another bell sounded. This one came from inside the gallery. A clerk in grey robes entered carrying a long wooden case. The commission will resume at noon, he announced. By order of Lord Percival, His Grace must remain without private assistance until the examination concludes. He looked at Marianne. Miss Vale must be removed from the house. Rosamond stepped forward. At last, an order with sense. Marianne did not move. The clerk opened the case. Inside lay a statement already prepared for Rosamond's signature. She read the first line. I, Lady Rosamond Vale, testify that my daughter was held at Briarwood Court, against her will, by the Duke of Asterley. Rosamond looked up. I have testified to nothing. Your arrival with a magistrate and physician confirms your concern. Concern is not testimony. The clerk's expression remained polite. Lord Percival was confident you would cooperate. Marianne turned toward her mother. Who told you to come here? No one. I received your message. I sent no message. The Duke looked at the anonymous note still in Rosamond's hand. May I see it? She gave it to him. He read the words, then turned the sheet over. On the reverse side was a faint watermark. A winged hourglass. The Duke's face changed. Percival's private paper. Rosamond stared at the prepared statement. The truth arrived with humiliating clarity. She had not broken into Briarwood to rescue Marianne. She had been invited. Her outrage, the magistrate, the physician, every part of her rescue had been anticipated and arranged to serve as evidence against the Duke. Marianne spoke quietly. Mother, you did not come to save me from him. Rosamond looked at the man she had already condemned. No. Marianne moved beside the Duke. You came to help the person I have spent 6 months trying to stop. The third bell sounded. The oak doors opened fully. Beyond them, 12 commissioners waited beneath the white-covered portrait of the Duke, and seated at the centre of the tribunal was Lord Percival Dane. He smiled when he saw Rosamond. "Lady Rosamond," he said, "how fortunate! You have arrived just in time to testify against the man your daughter has already sacrificed everything to save. Before we reveal how Marianne discovered the plot against the Duke, why Percival needed Rosamond's testimony, and what terrible accusation is about to be made against her daughter, subscribe to Nightfall Tales and like this video. Your support encourages us to keep creating quality content filled with mystery, emotion, and unforgettable twists." Lord Percival Dane smiled as though Lady Rosamond's arrival had completed a ceremony. Not a trial, not an inquiry, a coronation. He sat beneath the covered portrait of the Duke of Asterley, flanked by 12 commissioners in dark robes. Before him stood a long table arranged with ledgers, medical reports, sealed statements, and a silver cup containing the almond cordial Marianne believed had been used against the Duke. "Lady Rosamond," Percival said warmly, "your concern for your daughter does you great credit." Rosamond remained at the threshold. "You forged her handwriting." Percival's smile did not change. A serious accusation. "You summoned me here with a false message. I encouraged a worried mother to act upon suspicions she already possessed. You expected me to accuse the Duke. I expected you to tell the truth." Rosamond lifted the prepared statement. "This was written before I arrived." Percival folded his hands. "Because your daughter's letters made your likely testimony easy to predict." Marianne stepped into the tribunal room. "My letters were opened before they left Briarwood." Percival turned toward her. "Miss Vale, you were instructed to remain outside. I have obeyed enough instructions from men who intend to use my silence as evidence." A faint murmur passed among the commissioners. The Duke entered behind her, walking slowly but unaided. Rosamond noticed the effort it cost him to remain upright. His face was composed, yet his fingers pressed hard against the edge of a chair. Percival noticed too. "Your Grace," he said, "shall we begin before your condition worsens?" The Duke took his place at the opposite table. "My condition appears to worsen whenever you arrange the schedule." One commissioner looked sharply toward Percival. Percival ignored the remark. "The purpose of this inquiry is simple. We must determine whether the Duke of Asterley possesses the mental ability to control his estates, and whether Miss Marianne Vale manipulated his weakness for personal advancement." Rosamond stared at him. "Personal advancement?" Percival selected a document. "6 weeks ago, the Duke altered his will." Marianne's face tightened. Percival continued. "He removed 3 members of his family and named Miss Vale administrator of the Educational Trust, the Western Farms, and every village property associated with Briarwood." Rosamond turned toward her daughter. "You never told me." "I could not." "You could not, or would not?" "The letters were being opened. That did not prevent you from writing that you were trapped." "I never wrote that I was trapped. You wrote that you were not permitted to explain." Because Percival's secretary read everything before it left the estate. Percival raised the document. Miss Vale had ample opportunity to leave. Instead, she remained beside a confused man while persuading him to transfer authority into her hands. Marianne's expression hardened. "I persuaded him to protect land you intended to sell. An archivist offering estate advice. An archivist who found the original tenant agreements you had ordered destroyed." Several commissioners began whispering. Percival leaned back. "Produce them." "I cannot." "Because they never existed." "Because they disappeared from the Western Archive 2 nights ago." Percival smiled. "How convenient." The Duke's gaze remained on him. "You knew they were missing before she said so." For the first time, Percival's expression shifted. "Only slightly." "You informed the commission yesterday," he replied. "No," the Duke said. "I informed no one." The room quieted. Percival glanced toward the clerk standing near the wall. The clerk lowered his eyes. Marianne saw it. "Mr. Harrow," she said. Who told Lord Percival the documents had disappeared? The clerk did not answer. Percival's voice sharpened. This inquiry does not concern administrative gossip. It concerns missing evidence, Marianne replied. It concerns your conduct. Then let us discuss it fully. She placed both hands on the table. 6 months ago, I came to Briarwood to catalogue the late Duchess's papers. On my 3rd day, I found a list of villages scheduled for transfer to a private investment company. Percival interrupted. A perfectly legal sale. Except the villages were protected under the Duchess's marriage settlement. They could not be sold while the schools, infirmaries and tenant houses remained in use. Percival shrugged. Buildings fall out of use, which is why repairs were deliberately delayed. One commissioner removed his spectacles. Do you have proof? I had invoices showing that money allocated for repairs had been redirected. Redirected where? Marianne looked at Percival. To a company controlled through 3 false names. Percival gave a quiet laugh. And you traced these imaginary names yourself? No, the Duke did. Rosamond looked toward him. The Duke spoke carefully. Before my confused periods became severe, Marianne brought the accounts to me. We discovered that the company ultimately belonged to Percival's solicitor. Percival's smile vanished. You signed the transfer authorization. I signed nothing knowingly. You remember signing it. I remember you placing documents before me after the cordial was served. Dr. Ellison approached the silver cup. Has the drink been examined? Percival turned toward him. You were brought here as Lady Rosamond's physician, not as an investigator. I was brought because the note claimed a woman was in danger. I now see 2 people may have been. The physician lifted the cup but did not drink. Who prepared this? A servant near the wall raised her trembling hand. I did, sir. Marianne recognized her. Agnes. The young maid's face was white. Percival's secretary stepped forward. She is confused. Agnes looked at him with sudden fear. Dr. Ellison spoke gently. What were you instructed to add? Almond syrup. Only syrup. Agnes began to cry. The secretary's voice became firmer. Answer carefully. The Duke looked at him. She will answer freely. Agnes swallowed. A small powder was delivered each morning in a folded paper. By whom? Dr. Ellison asked. Agnes stared at the floor. Mr. Venn. The secretary's hand tightened. Percival rose. A frightened servant cannot be permitted to ruin a gentleman's reputation. Rosamond stepped between Agnes and the secretary. She has named him. Percival's gaze moved to her. You arrived believing the Duke had imprisoned your daughter. I arrived believing a lie you created. I merely allowed you to see what any sensible mother would see. No, you depended upon my fear. Rosamond looked at Marianne. And I gave it to you willingly. The confession hurt more, because it was true. She had read Marianne's letters, searching for proof of danger. Every unusual sentence had become evidence against the Duke, because Rosamond had already decided what sort of man he must be. Percival turned toward the commissioners. This spectacle proves nothing. The Duke remains unstable, Miss Vale remains the chief beneficiary of his altered will, and Lady Rosamond remains a mother whose judgment has been distorted by emotion. Then examine the Duke, Marianne said. Percival's eyes narrowed. That is precisely our intention. No, examine him without your schedule. The commissioners looked toward one another. Percival said, Explain. You arranged every previous examination at 4 in the afternoon, after the cordial was served. That was the commission's agreed hour. You chose it. The Duke's mornings were occupied. With what? Percival did not answer. Marianne turned to the commissioners. Examine him now. Ask him anything concerning the estates, the family, or the law. If he fails, I will leave Briarwood today and surrender every position named in his will. Rosamond stared at her. Marianne. Her daughter did not look away from the tribunal. Percival slowly sat, and if he succeeds. The commission suspends this hearing. seals the estate accounts, and removes Lord Percival from Briarwood until the missing records are found. The Duke looked at Marianne. "You did not discuss this with me. No, you have no right to gamble your future. My future became part of this the moment you placed my name in your will. I did that to protect the trust. And now I am protecting you." Something passed between them. Not romance, not obedience. A partnership forged under pressure. Rosamond finally understood the sentence her daughter had written. The Duke is no longer the man the county believes him to be. Marianne had not meant he had become cruel. She meant he had become vulnerable, and she had stayed because everyone else found his vulnerability useful. The senior commissioner, Lord Havers, rose. "The proposal is reasonable." Percival's face hardened. "It is improper." "So is examining a man only after serving him a suspicious drink," Havers replied. The commissioners began questioning the Duke. They asked the names of distant tenants, the boundaries of disputed fields, the annual income of the southern mills, and the precise wording of an inheritance clause written 20 years earlier. He answered every question. Not quickly, not theatrically, but correctly. Then Lord Havers placed a complex legal document before him. "Your Grace, identify the defect." The Duke read the first page. His eyes moved more slowly by the second. By the third, his grip tightened around the paper. Marianne noticed. "So soon," she whispered. Dr. Ellison looked toward the silver cup. "He has consumed nothing." The Duke blinked. The words before him appeared to blur. Rosamond watched his breathing change. Percival leaned forward. "You see, his decline occurs without assistance." Marianne hurried to the Duke's side. "What did you touch this morning?" "Nothing unusual." "Your gloves, left in the entrance hall. Your coat, still wet from the journey." Rosamond looked toward the chair where his travelling coat had been placed. A faint, sweet scent drifted from it. "Almond." Marianne. Her daughter followed her gaze. The Duke's coat had been brushed with a pale dust along the collar. Dr. Ellison crossed the room and examined it. "This powder can be absorbed from repeated contact." Percival's secretary moved toward the door. Magistrate Solby blocked him. "You will remain." The secretary turned pale. The Duke tried to rise but lost his balance. Marianne caught his arm before he fell. Percival spoke over the commotion. "This proves Miss Vale had access to his clothing." "No," Rosamond said. "The coat was taken by the entrance servants when he arrived." The steward stepped forward. Mr. Venn insisted upon receiving it himself. All eyes moved to the secretary. He backed away. Percival's face became unreadable. "Venn," he said quietly, "tell them who instructed you." The secretary stared at him. A new realization entered the room. Percival was not defending him. He was preparing to sacrifice him. Venn laughed once, without humor. "You promised I would be protected." "I promised nothing." "You said the Duke would be declared incapable by noon." Percival's voice became cold. "Be silent." "You said Miss Vale would take the blame because everyone already believed she wanted to marry him." Marianne went still. Rosamond looked at her daughter. "Marry him?" Venn's panic loosened every word. "The altered will was meant to make it look as though she had gained control through affection. The forged letters were meant to bring Lady Rosamond here. Her accusation would prove the family believed Marianne had been corrupted." Percival rose. "Remove him." Magistrate Solby did not move. "No one leaves." The Duke, still supported by Marianne, looked at Venn. "Where are the tenant agreements?" Venn's eyes darted toward Percival. "Destroyed." Marianne shook her head. "You would not destroy them before the commission ruled. They are your protection." Venn said nothing. She moved closer. "You kept copies." Percival's voice cut across the room. "He has confessed to poisoning a duke. Nothing he says can be trusted." "No," Marianne replied. "He has confessed to following your plan. Those are different things." Venn looked at Percival. You said no one would be harmed. Percival's face revealed nothing. You chose your actions. You chose the amount. A murmur moved through the tribunal. Dr. Ellison glanced at the Duke. This was not intended merely to confuse him. Marianne's face changed. What do you mean? The repeated doses were growing stronger. Had this continued, the damage might have become permanent. Rosamond looked at Percival. You intended to destroy his mind. I intended nothing. Venn suddenly pointed toward the western wall. The records are still here. Percival turned sharply. Venn continued. In the sealed chapel beneath the old family crypt. The Duke's breathing became shallow. That chapel was closed after my brother died. Percival's gaze snapped toward him. Marianne noticed. Your brother? The room quieted again. Rosamond knew the official story. The Duke's younger brother, Lord Stephen Astley, had died abroad 12 years earlier. Percival had inherited his property because Stephen left no legitimate child. Venn's next words changed everything. The tenant agreements were hidden with Lord Stephen's marriage certificate. Percival rushed toward him. Magistrate Solby seized his arm. The Duke stared at Venn. My brother was never married. He was, Venn said, and he had a daughter. Percival struggled against the magistrate. He is lying. Venn looked directly at Marianne. The child was placed under another name because her mother died soon after the birth. The Duke's face had gone completely still. Whose name? Venn swallowed. Vale? Rosamond's breath caught. Marianne turned toward her. No. Venn continued. Lord Stephen's daughter was raised by the only woman trusted to keep her hidden. He looked at Rosamond. Lady Rosamond Vale. Marianne stepped away from the Duke. Every expression in the tribunal changed. Percival stopped resisting. For the first time that morning he smiled again, because the accusation against Marianne had just become more powerful than manipulation. If Venn was telling the truth, she was not merely an archivist named in the Duke's will. She was Lord Stephen's secret daughter, the lawful heir to everything Percival had inherited. Rosamond looked at Marianne's shocked face and understood why Percival had lured her to Briarwood. He had never needed her only as a witness against the Duke. He needed her because she carried the final secret. The one she had sworn never to reveal. Marianne's voice trembled. Mother, tell me he is lying. Rosamond could not. The Duke looked between them, his weakened expression filling with terrible understanding. You knew who she was. Rosamond lowered her eyes. Yes. Marianne stepped backward. You allowed me to enter this house without telling me. I believed the marriage record had been destroyed. You knew Percival might recognize me. He had never seen you. You let me serve in the home that should have belonged partly to my father. I was protecting you. From whom? Rosamond looked at Percival. From the man who had already erased every person standing between him and the inheritance. Percival laughed softly. And now the frightened mother finally tells the truth. Lord Havers ordered the doors sealed. No one will leave Briarwood until the chapel is opened and every document is examined. The Duke looked at Marianne. If the marriage certificate exists, you are my niece. Marianne's eyes filled with tears. And Percival knew. Yes. He was not trying to remove me because I saved you. The Duke looked toward his cousin. No, he was trying to remove us both, because together we could prove who you are. A fourth bell sounded from the tower. This time it stopped halfway through the note. The steward entered the room in alarm. My lord, the sealed chapel has been opened. By whom? The Duke asked. The steward looked toward Percival. We found Lord Percival's men carrying a wooden chest through the lower passage. Marianne turned toward the doors. The records. The steward shook his head. The chest was empty. Percival's smile faded. Rosamond understood before anyone spoke. Someone else had reached the hidden documents first. Someone who had known the secret longer than Percival. and whoever possessed them could decide whether Marianne became an heiress or remained a nameless impostor, accused of controlling a duke. Now tell us what you think. Was Rosamund right to hide Marianne's true parentage in order to protect her, or did keeping the secret place her daughter in even greater danger? Should a mother be allowed to conceal a child's identity when the truth could make that child wealthy but also put her at risk? Share your honest opinion in the comments below. The empty chest was not proof that Marianne had lost the evidence. It was proof that Lord Percival had finally revealed what he feared. While the commissioners stared at the steward, Marianne turned slowly toward the eastern windows. Outside, the great tower bell hung motionless. It had stopped halfway through its fourth note. Marianne looked at the forged message in her mother's hand. Your daughter will belong to the Duke by noon. If you mean to save her, come before the eastern bell falls silent. The warning had never been about a wedding. It had never even been about rescuing Marianne. It was an instruction disguised as a threat. Someone expected the eastern bell to fall silent at noon. Someone had known precisely where the missing documents were hidden. Marianne faced Percival. You wrote the message. He remained beside the tribunal table, one arm still held by Magistrate Solby. You have already made that accusation. No, I accused you of summoning my mother. I did not understand why you mentioned the bell. Percival's expression revealed nothing. Rosamund looked toward the tower. What does the bell have to do with the marriage certificate? Marianne answered without taking her eyes from Percival. The chapel chest was a decoy. The Duke turned toward her. You knew it was empty? I emptied it 13 days ago. Every commissioner began speaking at once. Percival stared at her. For the first time, his confidence disappeared completely. The Duke gripped the table. You found my brother's documents? Yes. And you told no one? I told the steward to move a sealed bundle without explaining what it contained. The steward bowed his head. I followed Miss Vale's instructions. Lord Havers struck the table with his palm. Where are the documents now? Marianne looked at the stopped bell. Somewhere Percival cannot reach without telling us exactly where to search. Percival recovered his voice. This woman has admitted concealing estate records. She should be detained immediately. She concealed them from you, Rosamund replied. She had no lawful authority. The Duke straightened despite his weakness. She acted under mine. Marianne looked at him. That was not true. He had never authorized her to remove anything from the chapel. The Duke held her gaze. He knew it too, but he would not allow Percival to isolate her again. Percival laughed bitterly. A convenient memory from a man who cannot remember which room he entered. Dr. Ellison removed the Duke's contaminated travelling coat from the chamber and opened the nearest windows. His Grace requires air and rest, the physician said, not another insult from the man accused of weakening him. Lord Havers turned to Marianne. Can you recover the records? Yes. Then do so. Marianne shook her head. Not while Percival's secretary remains free to signal whoever stopped the bell. All eyes moved toward Mr. Venn. The secretary stood between two court officers, his face wet with nervous perspiration. I signaled no one. Then explain why the bell stopped, Marianne said. I cannot. Percival looked at him. Venn saw the warning in his eyes. He also saw something else. Abandonment. Percival had already tried to blame him for everything. Venn lowered his head. The bellkeeper was paid to leave his post at 11:45. Paid by whom? Magistrate Solby asked. Venn looked at Percival. No answer was necessary. Marianne approached him. What was supposed to happen when the bell stopped? A man would enter the tower through the roof passage. To retrieve the documents, I was told there would be a metal cylinder hidden near the bell's counterweight. Percival closed his eyes briefly. Venn had betrayed the final part of the plan. Lord Havers ordered 4 officers to secure the tower entrances. Marianne, Rosamund, the Duke, and the senior commissioners crossed the long eastern corridor together. Percival was brought behind them. As they walked, Rosamond caught Marianne's hand. "You should have told me what you found. You should have told me who I was. This is not the moment." "You decided that for 24 years." Rosamond released her. The words hurt, but she did not defend herself. The stairs to the tower were narrow and steep. The Duke managed the first flight before his strength failed. Dr. Ellison insisted he remain on the landing. Marianne stopped beside him. "I will bring the records down." The Duke shook his head. "If Stephen left something in that tower, I will see it where he placed it." "You can barely stand. And you have been standing alone for 6 months." His voice softened. "Allow me to reach the final steps with you." Marianne offered him her arm. Together they climbed. At the top, cold daylight entered through 4 open arches. The great bronze bell hung above them, its rope severed near the floor. Beside the counterweight was an empty space. The metal cylinder had already been removed. Percival smiled. "You see, there is nothing here." Marianne did not react. She examined the severed rope, the wooden frame, and the dust beneath the bell. Then she turned to Rosamond. "When Lord Stephen gave you the documents, what did he say?" Rosamond stared at her. "I never said he gave them to me. You knew the marriage record existed. You knew it had been placed at Briarwood. You also believed it had been destroyed. That means you saw it before it was hidden." Rosamond looked toward Percival. He was listening carefully. Marianne stepped closer to her mother. "For once, do not protect me with half the truth." Rosamond's eyes filled. "Stephen came to me 3 nights before he left England. He said Percival had discovered the marriage. What else? He gave me a copy of the certificate and told me the original would remain where his daughter could hear what others refused to say." Marianne looked up at the bell. "Where she could hear." Rosamond continued. "He said, when Briarwood forgets her name, the bell will remember it." Marianne walked beneath the bronze bell. Percival's men had searched the counterweight. They had cut the rope. They had removed the metal cylinder Venn knew about. But Stephen had expected someone to discover the obvious hiding place. Marianne placed her palm against the inside rim of the bell. Her fingers touched a narrow ridge that did not belong to the casting. "There is something here." The steward brought a ladder. Magistrate Solby climbed and carefully removed a thin brass plate fastened inside the upper curve of the bell. Behind it lay a flat leather packet wrapped in waxed cloth. Percival stopped smiling. Lord Havers carried the packet to a wooden bench. Inside were 4 documents. The first was a marriage certificate joining Lord Stephen Astley to Miss Helena Vale, Rosamond's younger sister. The second was a record of Marianne's birth, bearing Stephen's signature and the seal of the attending clergyman. The third was a series of letters proving Percival had learned about the child before Stephen's reported death. The fourth was a declaration addressed to the Duke. The Duke opened it with shaking hands. "My dear brother," he read. His voice caught, and Lord Havers continued for him. "If this declaration reaches you, Percival has acted sooner than I feared. My daughter must not be used to divide us. Her existence does not weaken your claim, nor does it threaten your title. The property inherited from her mother belongs to her, but Briarwood remains yours." Percival's face changed. He had spent years presenting Marianne as a threat to the Duke. Stephen's own words proved the opposite. Lord Havers continued, "Should my daughter one day enter your household, judge her by her actions rather than the secrecy forced upon her. If she protects Briarwood, when those bearing our name abandon it, then trust her. She will have earned what blood alone cannot grant." The Duke lowered his head. Stephen had written the letter before Marianne could walk, yet it described exactly what she had done. Percival turned toward the stairs. The court officers blocked him. "This proves only her parentage," he said. "It does not prove I harmed the Duke." Marianne picked up the third document. "It proves you paid the clergyman who witnessed my parents' marriage." Percival stiffened. "It proves you purchased the house where my mother spent her final months." and it proves you knew I existed before you inherited the property that should have passed to me." Venn spoke from the entrance. "There are account books in Lord Percival's London office." Percival turned on him. "You miserable coward." Venn's voice shook, but he continued. "They contain the payments for the cordial powder, the forged letters, the bell-keeper, and the men sent to the chapel." Percival looked toward Rosamond. "You began this. Tell them." Rosamond stepped forward. "Yes, I began the silence." Marianne stared at her. Rosamond's hands trembled. "Helena died 3 days after giving birth. Stephen asked me to raise Marianne until he could openly acknowledge the marriage. Before he returned, Percival sent word that Stephen had died abroad." The Duke looked at his cousin. "My brother's death." Percival's expression hardened. "I did not cause it, but you benefited from preventing his widow's family from questioning it," Rosamond said. "You threatened to declare Helena's marriage fraudulent. You said Marianne would be placed in the care of the estate and raised far from me." "So you hid her," the Duke said. "I changed her name, left the county, and allowed everyone to believe she was my child." Marianne's voice was barely audible. "You are my aunt." Rosamond looked at her through tears. "I am the woman who raised you, but you are not my mother. I held you through every fever. I taught you to read. I sat outside your door when you were afraid of storms. I loved you before you knew what the word meant." Marianne's eyes filled. "Then why did you not trust me with my own life?" "Because protecting you became the only purpose I understood. After a while, I could no longer tell the difference between keeping you safe and keeping you ignorant." The Duke looked toward the forged message. "And when Percival summoned you?" "I saw only danger. I believed Marianne's work had drawn attention to her identity. I assumed the Duke had discovered the truth and intended to control her inheritance." "You never asked me," Marianne said. "No. You came prepared to condemn him." "Yes, while I was trying to keep him capable of defending us both." Rosamond bowed her head. "Yes, there was no excuse left, only truth." Lord Havers ordered Percival removed from Briarwood, pending a full investigation. Venn agreed to surrender the account books and testify before the Crown Commission. As the officers escorted Percival toward the stairs, he looked back at Marianne. "You believe you have saved him. Wait until you discover what powerful men do when they no longer need the women who protected them." The Duke answered before Marianne could. "She will never need my gratitude to possess what is hers." Percival was taken away. For several moments, no one spoke. Then the Duke's knees weakened. Marianne caught him. This time Rosamond reached him as well. Together, mother and daughter helped the man they had entered Briarwood prepared to judge. 6 months later, the Eastern bell rang again. The Duke's confused periods had ended, though his recovery remained slow. The commissioners restored his full authority and confirmed Marianne as the lawful owner of the property, inherited through Helena Vale. Marianne did not leave Briarwood, nor did she become its duchess. Instead, she accepted leadership of the Educational Trust and reopened 3 village schools Percival had marked for closure. The servants continued wearing their white ribbons, not as symbols of loyalty to a title, but as reminders of the day ordinary witnesses had refused to remain silent. Rosamond returned to Vale House alone. For weeks, Marianne sent no letters. Then one arrived. It contained no forgiveness, only an invitation. "The Eastern School opens on Monday. The children need someone to teach them their first letters. You taught me mine." Rosamond came. She entered the classroom quietly and found Marianne arranging books beside the Duke. Rosamond stopped at the door. Marianne looked at her for a long moment. Then she placed a book upon the teacher's desk. "You may stay." Rosamond's voice broke. "As your aunt," Marianne considered the question. "As the woman who raised me. What I call you afterward will depend upon what we build truthfully." It was not complete forgiveness, but it was a beginning neither secrecy nor fear had purchased. Rosamond had travelled to Briarwood, believing she was rescuing her daughter from a powerful duke. Instead, she discovered that Marianne had protected his mind, preserved his estates, uncovered the conspiracy against him, and saved the truth that connected both their families. Rosamond's carriage had arrived with an empty seat, prepared for a helpless daughter. When it finally left, months later, the seat remained empty. Not because Marianne had been imprisoned, because she had chosen where she belonged, and the Duke whom Rosamond had intended to expose stood beneath the ringing eastern bell, alive and free, because her daughter had saved him long before anyone thought to save her.